doers! Welcome to Encyclopedia Brown, the case of the ambushed cowboy. Internet Everything Edition. Through his detective agency, Encyclopedia solved cases for children of the neighborhood. Occasionally, he even solved them cases for grown-ups. Whether his customers were children or grown-ups, they had one thing in common. They were always alive. He never supposed that one day he would solve a case in which all the people are dead for nearly 100 years. But that is what he did twice. While on a trip out west, the two adventurers in long-range detective work that had their beginnings in the dining room. In the Brown dining room, the diner was very quiet. For the third straight evening, Chief Brown had not brought home a mystery for Encyclopedia Brown to solve. There was nothing to do but eat. It's time we took a vacation, said Mrs. Brown. Chief Brown agreed. I haven't taken any time off in 3 years, he said. We could go on a long trip. Let's go to Texas, suggested Encyclopedia Brown. He had just read a book called Upper Cretaceous Limestone in the Lone Star State. It certainly is a long way roundabout, said Mrs. Brown, and as nobody could have answered a better reason to go to Texas, he had begun once to make plans. 2 weeks later, her encyclopedia found himself bouncing painfully atop of a honest to goodness Texas Mustang. His father was riding in front of him. The boy detectives wished he had stayed behind his mother instead. She had ridden a taxi in Fort Worth to have lunch and shop for gifts. Since sunrise, Encyclopedia, his father, and 14 fellow guests at the Badlands Inn had been on the saddle. They had paid $5 each for this tour in historic scenes of the old Wild West. All right, folks, dismount, shouted Mr. Scotty. The tour's skinny little guide. Mr. Scotty had bow legs. They made Encyclopedia think of rain. I could jump. I could open an umbrella to Mr. Scotty's and never touch either one, Encyclopedia thought. Mr. Scotty pointed at a high rock that formed a perfect corner. That there is the Johnny Kidd corner, he said. Back in the 1870s, Johnny Kidd ambushed Ringo Charlie on the very spot. The members of the tour stepped forward. They looked at the rock. They looked at Mr. Scotty. Mr. Scotty spat out tobacco juice between his teeth. In them days, he said, Johnny Kidd and Ringo Charlie were feuding at the poker table. Johnny Kidd claimed Ringo Charlie kept too many extra cards up his sleeve. Johnny Kidd never complained loudly, though. Ringo Cousin was caused to have to tell us, he said, the fastest drive in Texas. Mr. Scotty walked toward the hero. One fine day went on. Johnny Kid, he got fed up with losing money to a 60-deck art deck. So he hid behind this here rock, waiting for his chance. Mr. Scotty had acted out what Johnny Kid had done long ago. He crouched behind the high rock. Along about this time in the morning, 9 o'clock, said Mr. Scotty continues. Ringo Johnny comes riding along. Here the skinny guy rose from his crouch, went at the stone corner, and turned and started back toward it. Now that he was acting out the part of Ring Charlie. As Mr. Scotty moved towards the corner, he squinted in the morning sun. One hand was cupped above a pistol where a pistol would hang at his hip. Encyclopedia could almost see Johnny Kid crouched behind the rock, waiting in ambush. Mr. Scotty was Ringo Charlie riding toward him, unaware. And Mr. Scotty picked up the tail again. Johnny Kid saw Ringo Charlie's shadow coming while Charlie was still on the other side of this rock. Out jumps Johnny Kid from behind the rock. Both guns were blazing. Ringo Charlie was hit, but his horse rakes into a gallop and carries him back to town. Mr. Scotty squirted more tobacco juice. He hit a lizard between the rocks. Ringo Charlie, he said, told the folk what had happened. A fair fight was one thing. The Johnny Kid had taken foul advantage of poor Ringo Charlie. And Ringo Charlie was cousin to half the town. Mr. Scotty stopped talking. He started towards his horse. It was a fat man in a yellow shirt. Well, what happened? Why? Mr. Scotty turning. Ringo Charlie's cousins chased Johnny Kid clear into Oklahoma. They should have caught and hanged him, exclaimed the fat man. If they had, spoke up Encyclopedia, they would hang an innocent man. Well, what happened? What's that you say, boy? Gasped Mr. Scotty. Ringo Charlie lied about the shooting, said Encyclopedia Mom. Mr. Swatty nearly sold out his tobacco. I guess he hated to admit that he beat Johnny Kid in a gunfight, replied Encyclopedia Mom. Appears you're like a right smart young fellow, said Mr. Scotty. Now tell me, how you can know so much about something that hit me 85 years ago? Whether it happened then or yesterday wouldn't make any difference. The second time, Ringo Charlie can lie about the laws of nature. And according to World Page, And Ringo Charlie had said Johnny Kid knew he was coming, because at 9 o'clock in the morning, the shadow falling ahead of him gave him away. Johnny Kid had seen the shadow and jumped behind the rock shooting, but Mr. Scotty, the guide, acting on the part of Rain Charlie at the same time at the same spot, had squinted into the morning sun. That proved Ringo Charlie lied. With the sun on his face, Ringo Charlie's shadow would have fallen behind him. I hope you enjoyed this story. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share on Andrew Does Everything. Hang. And buy our merchandise too. Take care, Andrew's Doers. Bye. And now, Andrew Does Everything proudly presents Encyclopedia around the case of the mysterious handprints. Will they be able to figure it out? Andrew's Doers. Let's start with the case of the blonde wig, shall we? See? There was more to Idaville than met the eye. See? They're to passing motorists, Idaville life, and ordinary seaside town. It had lovely beaches, a little league, and two delicatessen. It had churches, a synagogue, and 4 banks. To a police chief, it's all over the country. However, Idaville was far from ordinary. No one had got away from breaking a law in Idaville. How did Idaville do it? And what was the secret behind the town's spotless police record? Only 2 grown-ups, Mr. and Mrs. Brown, knew the answer. Idaville's war on crime was masterminded by their only child. Only child, 10-year-old Encyclopedia. America's Sherlock Holmes and sneakers. Mr. Brown was the Idaville police chief. He was a fine officer, brave and smart. Like me. But sometimes he came up against a crime that even he could not solve. When that happened, he knew what to do. He drove home at the dinner table, he went over the facts of the case while Encyclopedia listened carefully. Nothing else was necessary. Encyclopedia usually figured out the guilty person before dessert. Even if he needed a few minutes extra, his mother was disappointed. Poor Mrs. Brown. Chief Brown hated keeping his son sleuthing undercover. He would have liked the president who declared her Encyclopedia a national treasure. But if he could tell the truth, who would believe him? Who would believe that the mastermind behind Idaville's crackdown on crime? I did look in the mirror after washing to see if his face was clean. If he looked at his towel. As for Encyclopedia, he never told anyone about the help he gave his father. He didn't want to seem different from other fifth graders. He was stuck with his nickname. However, only his parents and teachers called him by his real name, Leroy. Everyone else called him Encyclopedia. An encyclopedia is a book or a set of books filled with facts from A to Z. So it was Encyclopedia's head. He had read more books than anyone in Idaville, and he never forgot what he read. His pals decided that he was better than the library. He learned all kinds of things about books from him, such as footnotes don't come from squeaky shoes. At the dinner table Friday evening, G. Brown poked at his meatloaf. Encyclopedia and his mother knew what that meant. A case that had him puzzled. G. Brown who put down his fork. There was trouble at the yacht club this morning. He said aloud. Someone smashed the rudder of the Defiance. If you don't know what Defiance means, look it up. And you're about to find out. Isn't Defiance one of the sailboats in the Commodore's finals? Mrs. Brown inquired. Defiance is racing childhood the second, replied Chief Brown. Whichever boat wins out of the 2 or 3 races will be awarded the Commodore's Cup for the year. Yesterday, Defiance won the opening race. Encyclopedia had read about the Commodore's Cup finals in the Idaville News. Defiance was owned by Mr. and Mrs. Ernest Day. Childhood the second was owned by John Cushing. And his brother Tom, Childhood second, was fasters at Light Sea. Defiance was fasters at Rousey. When Mr. Day at the house, Defiance had slights for Wayne Greenways yesterday to win by more than 2 minutes. Why don't you give Leroy the facts about the smashed rudder, dear? Mr. Rod suggested. He'll figure out who did it. Cheerbrod smiled and withdrew a small notebook from his breast pocket. Here's what I have, he said. At 7 o'clock that morning, the night watchman at the yacht club went off duty. As he was leaving, a cleaning woman arrived. A few minutes later, it's a bit of a mess. The woman glanced out the window and saw one woman carrying a hammer. He was walking out on Pier 2 toward the slab where DFS was tied up. A light rain was falling. Then the cleaning woman didn't bother about the man. Not more than 10 minutes passed when she happened to glance out the same window. The pier was deserted. The man was gone. Giron said, so far as I could tell, no one else was on the pier at 8 o'clock. Then 5 or 6 men or women arrived to take out their boats. That's when the smashed rudder on the Defiance was discovered. Andrew Store's fun fact: the rudder gives the boat the power to steer, to tell which way to go. Do you think the blonde man is responsible? Mrs. Brown asked. Mrs. Brown asked. Perhaps, Brown answered cautiously. He flipped a page in his notebook. The manager of the yacht club telephoned Mr. Day, the owner of Diamonds, Brown continued, after examining the rudder. Her himself, Mr. Day called me. He said that the rudder couldn't be prepared in time for today's race, which was to start at noon. So the second race had to be postponed until tomorrow. That was a tough break for the Cushing brothers, Encyclopedia said. The seats were calm today. Childhood. On Hood the second line had a beaten die advance. And swear the series and one victory apiece. Boy. True, Chief Brown said. But one of the brothers might have smashed the rudder, hoping that it could be not repaired at all. What a horrible example of the sportsmanship, Mrs. Brown said. I feel so sorry for the Days. They're among the best liked couples at the yacht club. I questioned the Cushing brothers. Chief Brown said they don't have an alibi yet for 7 o'clock when the blonde man was on the pier. If you know what alibi means, look it up. Because I don't know that word either. I can't remember. Anyway, hey. They insisted they were eating breakfast. They could be lying. They live alone and no one saw them at breakfast. What about Mr. and Mrs. Day? Asked Mrs. Brown. Mr. Day said he and his Mrs. Day were still sleeping at 7 o'clock. Answered Chief Brown. Like the Cushing brothers, the Days live alone. And like the brothers, there is no one to support their story. Hey, Chief Brown leafed through several pages in his notebook. Shortly before 9 o'clock this morning, Mr. Day drove his way to the beauty parlor. There's a supper dance at the yacht club tonight, and she wanted her hair set. Had Mr. Day said that he just returned home when the phone rang. It was the manager of the yacht club. According to Mr. Day, that was when he learned about Diamonds' smashed rudder. Mrs. Brown looked at the encyclopedia at the corner of her eye. He had not asked this question. He had not, usually he saw the toughest mystery with one question. If only the cleaning woman had recognized the man, she declared. She saw only his badge, Brown said. Oh, I nearly forgot. I found a blonde wig at the top of the trash can outside the kitchen of the yacht club. The cleaning woman swears his wig wasn't there when she came to work. Herc. Mrs. Brown looked at the encyclopedia around. She seemed expectant to solve the case now he knew about the blonde wig. Encyclopedia closed his eyes. He always closed his eyes when he is deepest his thinking on a case. But he wasn't ready to yet ask his one question. So Mrs. Brown said, what color hair do John and Tom Cushing have and Mr. and Mrs. Day? The Cushing brothers had dark hair, Chief Brown replied. Mr. Day, his hair is blonde. Mrs. Day is a redhead. Suddenly, not really a redhead, but a girl who had red hair on their head. Suddenly, Encyclopedia opened his class. He asked this question. Dad, did you chat with the beauty parlor to see how Mr. Day drove his wife there this morning as he claims? He told the truth. One of the beauticians, say Handra. Mrs. Day out to the door. Leroy! Mrs. Brown exclaimed. The rudder of the day's sailing boat was fetched around 7 o'clock. They reached the beauty parlor some 2 hours later. What has one got to do with the other? Everything, Mom. Everything, Mom. From Encyclopedia. Shall we find out? Mr. Day wanted the second race to be postponed. The committee favored the Cushing's boat. However, he didn't want to commit a crime by damaging their boat, so he damaged his own. He wore a blonde wig and left it where it would be found. Since he was a blonde, he thought that to cast suspicion on the dark-haired Cushings, claimed that he first learned about the smashed rudder when the yacht club manager telephoned him after he had driven Mrs. Day for her to have her hair set. Therefore, as Encyclopedia realized that he already knew the race would be postponed, Mrs. Day, who would never had her hair set, a few days before competing at sailboat race, her new hairdo would have been blown apart in the wind. So, you know the answer? Good. Bye-bye, Andrew Stewart. Andrew Stewart! Andrew Does Everything proudly presents Encyclopedia Brown and the case of the Midnight Visitor. Now there are some people in the United States who have never heard of Idaville, but they were not policemen. Every policeman from Maine to California knew about Idaville. Anyone who broke the law that was caught, not a crook, escaped. How could that be? What was that secret? No one ever guessed. Idaville looked like many other seaside towns in its size. It had lovely beaches, 3 movie theaters, and 4 banks. It had churches and synagogues, and 2 delicious casinos. And on Rover Avenue, it had been a certain red brick house. In the house lived Idaville's secret weapon against crime, 10-year-old Encyclopedia Brown. Encyclopedia's father was the chief of police. Because no one got away with breaking the law, the people of Idaville thought he was the bravest, smartest police chief in the world. Kinda like me. Andrew Allinger, of course. Anyway, true, Chief Brown was brave, and he was smart enough to know what to do with a case that he could not solve. He took it home to dinner over, so he told his son the facts. Encyclopedia usually figure out the answer before dessert. Chief Brown hated keeping the help he got from his only child a secret. He wanted Encyclopedia Brown's sneakers hung up at the Crime Fighters Hall of Fame. But what good would it to suggest? Who would take him seriously? Who would believe that the mastermind behind Idaville's spotless police record was a 5th grader? So Chief Brown said nothing. Encyclopedia never mentioned the help he gave his father. He didn't want to seem different from other boys. There was nothing he could do about his name, however. Only his friends and teacher called him by his real name, Leroy. Everyone else called him Encyclopedia Brown. An encyclopedia is a book or a set of books filled up with facts from A to Z. So was Encyclopedia Brown. He had read so many books his pals swore his ears were turned into bookends. Monday evening, Chief Brown sipped his soup slowly. Boy, that's an alliteration abomination. Encyclopedia and his mother knew what that meant. He had his mind on a case. Finally, Mrs. Brown said, "Why don't you tell Leroy about it, dear?" Chairman said, "I don't know. This is an awfully tough case," he said. It has me beaten. Leroy has never failed you. Tell him," urged Mrs. Brown. "Very well," said G. Brown. C.T. Butler was kidnapped from his home last night. And I guess that's part 1. If you want to see part 2, Andrew's Doers, tell your friends about it. Take care. And buy merchandise on Andrew's Everyday. Subscribe, like, and share. Bye. Andrew's Doers. Welcome to Encyclopedia Brown and the Case of the Mystery Visitor. Part 2. Ready to hear some more? You're in luck. Now, there are some people in the United States who never heard of Idaville, but they were not policemen. And every policeman from California knew about Idaville. Anyone who broke the law who there was caught, not a crook escaped. How could that be? What was the secret? No one ever guessed. Idaville looked like many other seaside towns its size. It had lovely beaches, movie theaters, and 4 banks. It had churches, a synagogue, and 2 delicious scenes. And on Rover Avenue, it had a certain red brick house. And in the house lived Idaville's secret weapon against crime. 10-year-old Encyclopedia Brown. Encyclopedia's father was chief of the police. Because no one got away with breaking the law, the people of Idaville thought he was the bravest and smartest police chief in the world. True. Chief Brown was brave, and he was smart enough to know what to do with a case that he could not solve. He took it home for dinner. Our Sue, he's told his son the facts. Encyclopedia usually figure out the answer before dessert. G. Brown hated keeping the help he got from his only child a secret. He wanted Encyclopedia Seekers hung up in the Crime Fighters Hall of Fame. But what good would it do to Mr. Josh? Who would take him seriously? Who would believe the mastermind behind Idaho's Spotted Spacer was a 5th grader? So G. Brown said nothing. Encyclopedia never mentioned the help he gave his father. He didn't want to seem different from other boys. There was nothing he could do about his nickname, however. Only his parents and teachers called him by his real name, Leroy. Everyone else called him Encyclopedia. An encyclopedia is a book or a set of books filled with facts from A to Z, and so it was Encyclopedia's head. He had read so many books that his spouse swore his ears were turning into bookends. Monday evening, Chibra sipped his soup slowly. Encyclopedia Brown, Encyclopedia and his mother knew what that meant. He had his mind on the case. Finally, Mrs. Brown said, "Why don't you tell Leroy about it, dear?" Chibra sighed. "I don't know. This is an awfully tough case," he said. It has me beaten." "Leroy had never failed you, tell him," urged Mrs. Brown. "Very well," said Mrs. Brown. C.T. Butler was kidnapped from his home last night. Mrs. Brown asked. Encyclopedia let out a low whistle. C.T. Butler was a millionaire. He owned a string of pizza parlors in Free States and a big house by the ocean. Today at noon, Mrs. Butler received a phone call," said Chief Brown. "A man's voice has said that her husband is unharmed, but he was being held for $500,000 ransom. The caller told Mrs. Butler to remain home tomorrow, at which time she would be told by phone where to leave the money. You hope to capture the kidnappers before they pay the reason, Dad," said Encyclopedia. We must, replied Chief Brown grimly. Kidnappers want money. Once they get it, there is no telling what they might do with victim. "Poor Mr. Butler!" exclaimed Mrs. Brown. "Well, at least you have until tomorrow to find him." "There's too little time," said Chief Brown. "Somebody must have heard or seen something," said Encyclopedia. "Mrs. Butler was of some help," said Chief Brown. "From what she told me, it's possible to fit together a few pieces." He took a spoonful of his soup. Then he related all that the police had been able to learn about the kidnapping. Last night, Mr. and Mrs. Butler were in bed watching a late movie on television. A little after midnight, from the phone rang. Mr. Butler went downstairs to see who it was. Mrs. Butler turned off the television and listened. She heard him talking to someone. She thinks it's a man. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone was friendly. Then she heard the sounds of the door closing and footsteps going to the den. Mr. Butler and his visitor lowered their voices. She could scarcely hear them at all. She went to sleep. She was awakened by the closing of the front door and went back to sleep. When she awoke this morning, Mr. Butler wasn't in the house. The front door was closed, but unlocked. Okay. Wasn't Mrs. Butler worried? Asked Mrs. Brown. No, answered Miss G. Brown. She thought her husband had dressed quietly so he wouldn't wake her and had gone to the office. He sometimes forgets to lock the front door behind him. She didn't report him until she got the phone call from the kidnapper. Wasn't she worried what he didn't return to bed after the visitor left? Said Mrs. Brown. Chief Brown shook his head. Mr. Butler had to get up at night to work in his den. He thought she had simply remained downstairs to go over some business. You don't have much to work with, dear, said Mrs. Brown. We know that whoever came new to the door was a stranger. Mr. Butler never would have let a stranger in his house late at night. I think this is what happened. The visitor spoke with Mr. Butler at the den. No. Then he opened the window and made Mr. Butler climb into the backyard where other men were waiting. They forced Mr. Butler into a car on a dark street and drove away. The visitor left by the front door. Wasn't that dangerous? Said Mrs. Brown. Someone might have seen him under the night light. He was probably afraid that he'd been seen entering the house, so he had to be seen leaving. He was prepared to say that Mr. Butler was still in the house when he left. But no one saw him even after enter or leave, and then you really have no clues, said Mrs. Brown glumly. Only a calendar, replied Chief Brown. He got up from the table and returned with his briefcase. He took out a calendar. On it was handwritten in the pencil, 7A91011. I hope you enjoyed this story, everyone. May this could be a daily tradition. Take care. Bye. Andrew's Doers. Welcome to Encyclopedia Round and the Case of the Midnight Visitor. Part 3. Now there are some people in the United States who had never heard of Idaville, but they were not policemen. Every policeman from Maine to California knew about Idaville. Anyone who broke the law there was caught. Not a single crook escaped. How could that be? What was the secret? No one ever guessed. Idaville looked like many other seaside towns its size. It had lovely beaches, 3 movie theaters, and 4 banks. It had churches, a synagogue, and 2 delicious castles. And on Rover Avenue, it had a certain red brick house. In the house lived Idaville's secret weapon against crime. 10-year-old Encyclopedia Brown. Encyclopedia Brown, father, was the chief of the police. Because no one got away with breaking the law, the people of Idaville thought he was the bravest and smartest and police chief in the world. True, G. Brown was brave and he was smart enough to know what to do with a case that he could not solve. True, G. Brown was brave. Oops. He took it home to dinner. So he told his son the facts. Encyclopedia Brown usually figured out the answer before dessert. G. Brown hated keeping the help he got from his only child a secret. He wanted encyclopedias sneakers hung in the Crime Fighters Hall of Fame. But what good would it do to suggest? Who would take him seriously? Who would believe that the mastermind behind Idaville spotless believer was a 5th grader? So G. Brown saved nothing. Encyclopedia Brown mentioned the help he gave his father. He didn't want to seem different from his other boys. There was nothing he could do about his nickname, however. Only his parents and teachers called him by his real name, Leroy. Everyone else called him Encyclopedia. An encyclopedia is a book or set of books filled with facts from A to Z. So was Encyclopedia's head. He had read so many books his pa swore his ears were turning into bookends. More on the evening, G. Brown sipped his soup slowly. Encyclopedia Brown and his mother knew what that meant. He had his mind on a case. Finally, Mrs. Brown said, "Why don't you tell Leroy about it, dear?" She sighed. I don't know, it's an awfully tough case. And he said, "It has me beaten." "Leroy has never failed you, tell him," urged Mrs. Brown. "Very well," said Mrs. No, Chief Brown. C.T. Butler was kidnapped from his hall last night. Mrs. Brooke asked, Encyclopedia let a rollless whistle. C.T. Butler was a millionaire. He owned a string of pizza bars in 3 states and a big ocean by the house. Today at noon, Mrs. Butler received a phone call. said Mrs. Brown. Chief Brown. A man's voice said that her husband was hard, but he was being held by $500,000 ransom. The caller told Mrs. Butler to bring home tomorrow, at which time she would be told by home where to leave the money. You hope to capture the kidnappers before you pay them the ransom, Dad, said Encyclopedia. We must, replied G. Brown grimly. Kidnappers want money. Oh, once they gathered, there is no one telling Mrs. what they might do to the victim. Poor Mr. Butler, exclaimed Mrs. Brown. Well, at least you have until tomorrow to find him. There's too little time, said Chief Brown. Somebody must have heard or seen something, said Encyclopedia. Mrs. Brown was of some help, said Chief Brown. From what she told me, it's possible to fit together a few pieces. He took a spoonful of soup. Then he related that all that police have been able to learn about the kidnapping. Oh, it's time for my Yahtzee game. Ender's Doers you want to see tomorrow. Encyclopedia Brown. And the case of the missing visitor. Part 4. Tell your friends about it. Maybe it could be a daily tradition. Take care. Bye. Ender's Doers, welcome to Encyclopedia Brown and the case of the Midnight Visitor. Part 4. Now there are some people in the United States who had never heard of Idaville, but they were not policemen. Every policeman from Maine to California knew about Idaville. Anyone who broke the law there was caught, not a crook escaped. How could that be? What was the secret? No one ever guessed. Idaville, like many other seaside towns its size, it had lovely beaches, 3 movie theaters, 4 banks, it had churches, a synagogue, a Duke testing. Excuse me. And on Rover Avenue, it had a certain red brick house. And in the house lived Idaville's secret weapon against crime, 10-year-old Encyclopedia Brown. Encyclopedia's father was chief of police because no one got away with breaking the law. The people of Idaville thought he was the bravest and smartest police chief in the world. True, Chief Brown was brave, and he was smart enough to know what to do with a case that he could not solve. He took it home to dinner. Over soup, he told his son the facts. Encyclopedia usually figured out the answer before dessert. Chief Brown hated keeping the help he got from his only child a secret. He wanted Encyclopedia's sneakers hung in the Crime Fighters Hall of Fame. But what good it would do the suggestion? Who would take him seriously? Who would believe that the mastermind Idaville spotless police record was a 5th grader? Some of you may already know that enters yours. Anyway, so Chief Brown said nothing. Encyclopedia never mentioned the help he gave his father. He didn't want to seem different from other boys. There was nothing he could do about his nickname, however. Only his parents and teachers called him by his real name, Leroy. Everyone else called him Encyclopedia. Fun facts. His nickname is a book or a set of books filled with facts from A to Z, so it was Encyclopedia's head. He had read so many books and his pa swore his ears were turning into bookends. Monday evening, Chief Brown sipped his soup slowly. That's an alliteration abomination. Encyclopedia and his mother knew what that meant. He had this mind on a case. Finally, Mrs. Brown said, "Why don't you tell Leroy about it, dear?" Chief Brown sighed. "I don't know. This is an awfully tough case. It had me beaten." "It has never failed you. Tell him," urged Mrs. Brown. "Very well," Chief Brown said. C.T. Butler was kidnapped from his house last night. Mrs. Brown gasped. Encyclopedia let a low whistle. C.T. was a millionaire. He owned a string of pizza parlors in free states and a big house by the ocean. At noon, Mrs. Butler received a phone call to Mrs. Brown. A man's voice said that her husband is unharmed, but he was being held for $500,000 ransom. The caller told Mrs. Butler to remain home tomorrow, at which time she would be told by phone where to leave the money. You hope to capture the kidnappers before the R paid the ransom, Dad, said Encyclopedia. "We must!" replied Chief Brown grimly. Kidnappers want money. Once they get at it, there is no telling what they might do to their victim. "Poor Mr. Butler!" exclaimed Mrs. Brown. "Well, at least you have until tomorrow to find him." "There's too little time," said Chief Brown. "Somebody must have heard or seen something," said Encyclopedia. Maybe I'll read more tomorrow. Maybe it could be a daily tradition and yours. Don't forget to buy our merchandise at entertainment.com. Subscribe, like, and share. Take care. Bye. Andrew's Doers. Sorry it's been yesterday, but welcome to Encyclopedia Round Part 5. Now there are some people in the United States who had never heard of Idaville, but they were not policemen. Every policeman from Maine to California knew about Idaville. Anyone who broke the law there was caught. Not a crook escaped. How could that be? What was the secret? No one ever guessed. Idaville looks like many other seaside towns its size. It had lovely beaches, 3 movie theaters, and 4 banks. It had churches, a synagogue, and 2 casinos. And on Rover Avenue, it had a certain red brick house. In the house lived Idaville's secret woman against crime, 10-year-old Encyclopedia Brown. Encyclopedia's father was the chief of police. Because no one got away with breaking the law. The people of Idaville thought he was the bravest and smartest police chief in the world. True, Chief Brown was brave, and he was smart enough to know what to do with a case that he could not solve. He took it home to dinner. About over soup, he told his son the facts. Encyclopedia usually figured out the answer before dessert. Chief Brown hated keeping the help he got from his only child a secret. He wanted Encyclopedia's Brown hung in the Crime Fighters Hall of Fame. But what good would it do to suggestion? Who would take him seriously? Who would believe that the mastermind behind Idaville's responsibility was a 5th grader? So Chief Brown said nothing. Encyclopedia never mentioned the help he gave his father. He didn't want to seem different from other boys. There was nothing he could do about his nickname, however. Only his parents and teachers call him by his real name, Leroy. Everyone else can call Encyclopedia. An encyclopedia is a book or a set of books filled with facts from A to Z. So is Encyclopedia's head. He had read so many books, his pals swear his ears were turning into bookends. Monday evening, G. Brown set his suit slowly. Encyclopedia Brown and his mother knew what that meant. He had his mind on a case. Finally, Mrs. Brown said, "Why don't you tell Leroy about it, dear?" G. Brown sighed. "I don't know, this is an awfully tough case," he said. "It has me beaten." "Leroy has never failed you, tell him!" "Urged Mrs. Brown. "Very well," said G. Brown. C.T. Butler was kidnapped from his house last night. Mrs. Brown gasped. Sorry about the cough, but I guess that's it for today. If you want to see part 6 tomorrow, maybe I'll do a lighter gasp. Take care. Bye. Bye. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share, okay? And buy our merchandise. Visit InternersEverything.com.